welcome back. So this video it's going to be an airport system video. I've done a couple of those. Probably my best one, the longest one, have been probably the one in Tokyo where I kind of explained the difference between Narita and Hanada. I feel like doing it again, but this time I thought, since I was just there recently in New York City region, I was going to talk about the New York airports, because there's actually 3 major airports, including, technically they're all international, but really 2 main international hubs, and there's also, it's like basically every U.S. airline but Southwest has a hub in New York City region, and that varies a lot too where they are. But that said, before I start, I do want to mention this airport, Long Island MacArthur Airport. Only Southwest flies there. So Southwest flies to LaGuardia and Long Island. Not many flights to Long Island, probably more to LaGuardia. But if you ever fly Southwest, be mindful. Sometimes I'll put the New York City region, include this airport. You're really far away from New York City. So this is definitely a low-cost carrier tactic. You'll see that definitely Ryanair, EasyJet, and even Southwest at times, especially like you think of like how they fly in the Midway, Houston Hobby, Dallas Love Field over the bigger airports and the more modern airports, maybe with better transportation connections and so forth. So just be mindful of that. But we're not going to really tour that airport. We're going to mostly focus on Newark, LaGuardia, and then also JFK. I'm going to start in Newark. We're going to do a big kind of like an arch here. Kind of see some of the sites on the way, and we can go over all that. But yeah, we're going to start here at Newark Airport. This is on the New Jersey side of the New York City region. One thing, though, I do want to say, kind of starting out about this airport, and this is going to be a theme of all the airports, the pluses and minuses of each airport. The benefits, the cons, the good and bad, because in my view, the reason I like doing these videos, and I'm just doing it for fun, but I find aviation and travel just fascinating, especially personally. I've traveled a lot over the years, and I've been very thankful and fortunate to travel, quite a bit and been to different airports, see, the different systems in play. It's kind of like, Heathrow and Gatwick are both in London, but like Heathrow's only connected by the 2, what Gatwick is not, for example, or EasyJet's at 1. Like there's a lot of variations that, for first-time flyers, or let's say people who don't travel a lot, don't know that, and that's the point of these videos, just to have a little fun and kind of explain that. And one final note before I start: I've been to LaGuardia and Newark over the years. I've never been to JFK. I know a lot about JFK, but sadly, I've not personally experienced it firsthand. But at least I know a lot of the information that I think I can at least convey to you guys and everyone that's watching, so you have a better understanding. But anyway, we'll start in Newark Liberty International Airport over here. I turn off the voices so they won't you're not supposed to land now, you can't take off now. So anyway, but to give you a sense, all the airports are actually pretty old. They've all been around, at least routes since the 20s and 30s, World War II. But anyway, Newark originally is from the 20s. But obviously, if you think about then, back then it would be like a building and stuff. It wasn't like today with these massive terminals, international rivals, and so forth. But anyway, built in 1928. I got a bunch of notes, by the way. I was prepared for this. But in World War II, it was under military control, basically, for the war. But then it went back to commercial airlines shortly after the war. But this is where I would say the modern version of Newark Airport. Also, real quick, I should mention this, sorry. I did not buy there's someone created in Newark Airport, in the store. I was debating buying it, but it didn't look that good, and I'd be honest, this is probably the ugliest airport now in terms of architecture and design. It's very unimaginative. It's like very 70s, just a big atrium looking thing. Really not much to look at, to be honest. Sorry, I just want to mention that real quick. So, but anyway, but really, the modern Newark, if you ever go there, really started probably more in the 70s when they did their major expansion. They did terminals A and B open. C is technically the oldest, but it was really weird. They started working on it in the 70s, and they stopped, and then they finished in the 80s. So it was like literally sat there for like a decade, not being finished. I couldn't really figure out why. I tried to look that up. There's really not much information because it's been so long ago. But yeah, it's pretty dumb. And by the way, that's a United Airlines flying in front of us, which is the main hub here, which I'll also go that in a second here. But anyway, so really a lot of this airport is very 70s. Well, let me phrase that. It's modern now with like the amenities and stuff, but the design is very 70s. So you kind of see its main terminals. If I recall, this is C, B, and A, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Now the nice thing about this airport, a couple things. It's all connected by a tram, which that's more a lot of airports, and I think including JFK. But it's very easy to connect terminals. So let's say you arrive on Lufthansa Terminal B, and you need to connect to United Terminal A to go to, let's say, Charlotte or something. It's once you pass through customs, you get to go through the terminal. You like the tram there and go over. The downside is though, you will have to re-go through security. It's the same issue you see at. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Yeah, I believe so. They're not connected. Same issue at Chicago O'Hare Airport as well. So, but anyway, but the nice thing though, like, it's gonna be a little hard, but over here is like the rental car center, so the tram goes there, and there's also like parking. I think it's more short-term parking over here, so the tram kind of does this big loop. Over here, you also somewhere over there, the tram does go to the train station, and that's where you can connect to get to, let's say, connect to New Jersey Transit, which will take you right into Manhattan, and that'd be another element about this airport in a second. But actually, no, let's do that now. So the big benefit of this airport, in my opinion, this is the best airport to go through. Let's say if you want to go, if you're not going directly into Manhattan, so it's right off the interstate. It's west of Manhattan, so there's Manhattan over there. I'm gonna do a pause above this here in a second. So, like, let's say you're just leaving, you're about to go. Go. Yeah. All right. So as you kind of see here. Anyway. So yeah. See, it's off the interstates. It breaks off. Newark's over here. Jersey City is like over here, roughly, if I recall. Actually, it might be close over there. And then you kind of have Staten Island nearby, which is actually still part of New York City. It's part of the 5 boroughs. But anyway, yeah, if you're like going, let's say, you're going to stay on the Jersey side, or even let's say going upstate to New York, upstate New York, or up into the Hudson Valley, this is the better airport to go through, because the other ones you have to kind of go through Manhattan or the Queens, where the traffic's a lot heavier, it's a lot more congested, it does not move very well. Here, in my personal experience, traffic usually moves pretty well here. Obviously, there will be slowdowns and so forth, especially you go east towards like the Hudson Tunnel and going to into New York City. But this is probably the easiest airport to get out of in terms of like by car. By train, it's also very convenient. Basically, you kind of connect somewhere. It's east of the airport, but it may see in a bit. Or actually, yeah, I think this is the rail line. Yeah, it kind of connects somewhere near here. But anyway, the rail line, it'll take you right into Manhattan. Now, the downside, it's not cheap. It's about $30, $35 last I saw to get into Manhattan from there. But it's very convenient. What you could do, you can get really creative. This is what's nice about this region. You could pay less. Go to Newark's Penn Station. I believe it's Newark Penn Station. And then there you can hop over to the PATH train, which is very cheap to get across. The PATH train's like, it looks like a New York City subway, but it's run by New Jersey Transit, I believe. And it's kind of interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of, in New York City, they have the port of, it's like the Port Authority, which covers both New Jersey and New York. And that also includes some of the overlap transportation. So like on the New York side, it's the MTA Metropolitan Transit Authority. On the Jersey side, New Jersey Transit. But obviously, they'll meet together at like Penn Station in New York City. There's going to be like connections there because it's all one massive system. So, but anyway, but yeah, that's kind of the benefit. Now, taxi-wise, I would avoid that in a heartbeat. You can get New York City taxi here, but it's like, I looked it up. It's like $80 because it is the farthest airport from Manhattan, which it's not that far in reality, but it is in terms of the other 3 airports and not being part of New York City. So there's like tollways to get into New York, especially like the Holland Tunnel, which is a big, like a big thoroughfare to get into Manhattan from here and so forth. So, let's see here. I'm looking at my notes. I think now I'm about to talk about the major airlines. Yeah, 1 second here. So right now, this is mostly United hub now. It used to be Continental Airlines, and that's actually I've been in that airport a lot since the 90s. I flew here as a kid, probably TWA. 2009 when I came back from Europe, from study abroad, I took Continental from here to St. Louis eventually. But then United merged with Continental 10-ish years ago, maybe a little more, a little less. It's about a decade now. They merged. They became United Hub. And the good news, United's kind of expanded their operations here. This is a very big airport for them on the East Coast. Probably bigger than Dulles. Obviously, their biggest in the U.S. will probably still be Chicago and then San Francisco, and then Newark will be right there. They treat New York also as like a launching for Europe. Obviously, they got international flights like the Asia, like Tokyo, and I think Hong Kong as well. But their main thing is Europe. So there you see some direct flights to, like Rome, Vienna. I think they go to Milan. Now, granted, I'm thinking some of these were pre-COVID. They might be suspended now and might come back. There's obviously been a lot of changes in the last 2 years because of that. But it's a primarily European launch hub, and it makes sense. It's right, it's basically the pond's right here. The Atlantic Ocean, they call it the pop of the pond. So you have a lot of flights that are directly to Europe. So even like from Chicago, while they do have quite a few to Europe, there's some routes that aren't, so they'll fly to Newark and then you connect and hop over to Europe. Now, that said, there's a couple downsides with this airport and this whole setup now. United's about 75% of its traffic out of this, which is good for one airline. The bad news is its partners. So they're in Star Alliance, and they have some of their partners are here. So like Lufthansa will fly here, and JFK, for example. And let's say you took Newark and you need to connect to Lufthansa and then Munich. Luckily that can happen. Obviously you have to kind of come out, reconnect, come out and like reconnect here, unfortunately, because this is the international terminal. Oh, I take that back. Sometimes with departures, let me rephrase that actually. Let me back up 1 second. The big change is now international departures will be in the same terminal as domestic. For departures, for arrivals, it comes here because U.S. Customs is here, for example. So a good example, like Lufthansa, which they've done this in Chicago, and I believe it's in Newark as well. They'll have the departure out of the main domestic terminal United, so if you have to connect, you don't have to hop terminals anymore. It's all in the same terminal. It's very convenient and a very good idea, to be honest. But anyway, downside, if you come over from Germany, you go through here, and you have to connect over here. Over here is mostly the other airlines, and there's not many. Technically, like American Delta go through here, but it's like limited, because it's not a hub. And JetBlue actually has got quite a few routes, but only count about 5% of total traffic out of Newark Airport. It's like 75% United at this point. And kind of backtracking, so that means. But I mentioned like Lufthansa flies here, and even some other odd ones like Ethiopian. But let's say ANA. ANA is a major player in the Star Alliance network with United. Them and United got big partnerships now with, and ANA is Japanese airline. They only fly into JFK. So if you were flying, let's say you had to connect to ANA. Now, thankfully, they normally don't do this, but it does show up. They usually don't recommend they do that. But let's say you had to, or let's say you took ANA, you need to connect to, get to, let's say, Richmond, Virginia, or Philadelphia, or Pittsburgh. You were flying to JFK. Then you got to figure out to get from JFK to here. This is the biggest flaw with this airport, is because it does not have. Unfortunately, United is a great to me, I like United. I think it's a good airline. It has a great operations here. The downside, not for its partners, because a lot of it still goes to JFK, and partially because of size and stuff. You kind of see it's a good sized airport. It's a big airport, but like JFK's got 6 terminals, for example. It's able to handle all this international traffic. It's got the customs set up very well. Here it doesn't have that. It's kind of dated too. Well, let me rephrase that. Excuse me. The design's kind of dated. The good news, like at least I can tell you from the United terminal, which is here, it's very nice inside. They've renovated over the years. Got tons of restaurants now, shops, even duty-free shops there. Sometimes you don't see as many domestic terminals. It's usually just more the international. You kind of see that. But plenty. But it's a very nice setup. Honestly, I put ahead of Chicago here now in terms of offering, especially because the stuff has closed out here during COVID and they haven't reopened it. Or it's just pretty bland or bad. It's like, it's like some of the restaurant choices just suck at O'Hare. There's some good ones, obviously, but there's probably more bad choices to go. Everything I've had at Newark so far has been pretty tasty. So, my flights in and out of that airport. So, but anyway, before we're going to fly out of here, the good news, and this is going to be a theme of all the airports in the region, is that it is going to go into some renovations soon. That said, I'm not sure when exactly. It looks like they want to kind of redo one of the terminals. Like, they've done renovations like inside, but I think they're going to want to actually rebuild one of the whole terminals here. Because it is kind of, it's a dated design. It's not the best design, to be honest. It works, obviously, but, you know, it's like, you know, if they really want to, you know, right now they're at a crossroads because they're, you know, they're doing a lot of renovations at LaGuardia. They're about to do a lot of JFK. And then we need to do some in Newark as well, but now we hit the COVID, so obviously there's a lot of debate now when that traffic will recover. You know, it likely will recover, but then it's like, well, what if the business traffic doesn't recover? So there's going to be a lot of debates about this in the next probably couple of years. So you know, it'd be very interesting. It'd be very interesting how that's going to play out. I really don't know what much more to say, to be honest. So, but anyway, let's start flying. So yeah, I have a lot to say about these airports. But yeah, you see UAW, this is American Airlines. It's going to Dallas Fort Worth. It's their headquarters / hub. Yeah, you know, but you can see it's a good sized airport. I'd say for transportation, at least by car and road, this is probably the best airport to get out of, in my opinion. And honestly, the train system is very well done, so that's one reason I've flown out. Actually, if you want to save a little money, potentially, because it all comes down to hotel, and you got to figure out your, let's say, your other costs like transportation and so forth. But let's say you got a good hotel for like $100. In New York, it'd be like $150, $200. And let's say it includes parking, then you're going to save money just taking that train. Now, you will lose time, so it is the downside. But, you know, it's like that factor. You know, are you willing to sacrifice some time to save quite a bit, you know, a little money? Because unfortunately, parking is always the big issue in Manhattan, for obvious reasons. It's a landlocked island. It's an island with like, you know, several million, you know, a couple million people on one island, basically. Yeah, also you kind of got ports here. Now, I think this is kind of a little fun. There's like I think this is the bridge. Yeah, it doesn't do justice. There's like a couple bridges that are really tall. It's really cool, honestly. Oh, no, that's it over here. I'm on this bridge. Yeah, it's several stories high. You kind of see it from here, but it doesn't do justice. And I believe Staten Island is this one. It's really weird. Yeah, you'd be like New Jersey and then back to New York. Yeah, it's like Staten Island, so it's like New Jersey, New York, so. And as you kind of tell, again, this is the farthest from Manhattan, because obviously, you know, well, let me phrase it. Traffic to airports will vary a lot of reasons, but the city center is always like where people are going to go. The next one we're going to go over is LaGuardia, and that's going to probably be a little shorter. It's the smallest airport. I'll explain a bit, but you know, before we get there, at least we can fly over a couple things here. Yeah, there's Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty Island, which is just there a few days ago when I'm recording this. I tell you what, if you want to spend time there, it's going to be a good day trip. It's a lot more than I imagined. And I didn't even go into the Statue of Liberty. I just walked to the grounds, and they have all this. The Guardia tour, kind of explaining the history of the, you know, the island itself, but the statue and how it got there. There's a new museum there now. Not a big one, but like a little, kind of showed when they did the renovations, restorations in the 80s, because, you know, it's kind of rusting from the sea air and stuff, and so forth. And then Ellis is obviously was the major immigration center for a good, you know, about 50 years roughly, especially in the earlier 20th century. So you learn a lot about that. You learn about. Now that said, so the main part of the museum and stuff is on this side. It's like the original building, you know, for rivals and stuff. This side, you actually need a hard hat tour. That's like the old hospital and stuff that used to quarantine people that might have seemed sick and so forth. And over here, you have Governor's Island. This is actually so. Little known fact: these are run by the National Park Services. This is run by the state of New York. To get to Liberty Island, though, you need to take a ferry. That's actually a third-party company that's licensed by the National Park Service to get there. The good news, it goes to both from New York and New Jersey. New York starts, you know, goes from Manhattan to here, then back to Manhattan. From New Jersey, it's like down here in Jersey City. That's Jersey City, by the way. Goes here, then back to Jersey City. You know, just a little fun fact. Oh yeah, and also, so LaGuardia is in Queens. Well, I think New York's technically east of Brooklyn. I don't know how. It's on Long Island, so I don't know. It gets a little confusing with the Queens, and I'm not entirely sure when Queens and Brooklyn begins and ends, because it kind of, like, this is Brooklyn here, Queens is up here, and there's obviously going to be a border that divides the borough. Manhattan's its own borough. Over here, obviously the main financial area, but this is the One World Trade Center. Sadly 9/11. Recording this was actually yesterday for the 20th anniversary. So, but it was very somber. But anyway, yeah, this obviously Manhattan. I can actually go over a lot about Manhattan itself, but it's a lot of people kind of know what everything is. I'm more about the airport, so that's where it gets more. One, there's an aviation game, and B, that's where the information. That's something you would think about. You always think about when you go to the place. You're like, oh, what do I want to see? I want to see. Maybe One Trade Center, going to the Empire, Rockefeller Plaza, the Met, an art museum. And then it's like, okay, we need to go to New York. Oh, wow, we got 3 airports. Well, what's the difference? And that's part of the reason for this video. I just wanted to do it anyway. Oh, windy today. But look at this, at least it's sunny and clear. This is live weather. Actually, check that actually. Yeah. And live time. So, sorry, a little silent here, just kind of waiting to get closer. Kind of, actually, this would be good. So, we're talking about the highways and transportation. Now, you do have interstates here and so forth, but these bridges, I can tell you, are very congested. It takes, I had to pick up my dad at LaGuardia recently, because I flew in Newark and he flew in LaGuardia just because of the hurricane causing, disruptions and cancellations and so forth. But this highway, there's like a little highway, it's packed. And you got to go through here to get, because we're going north to Hudson, so eventually we kind of cut through here and then get over here to the George Washington Bridge. This is very congested, pretty much all the way through here. A lot more than coming in through New Jersey, which I can personally tell because I've been on that route a lot before. So that's the downside. The other downside with this airport, there's no subway to train connection. The MTA subway does not make it here. It's all residential. There's no place to build it unless they tear down a lot of housing and stuff. And even underground would be very costly, which I don't think they have ever really justified. The good news, there's 2 good things though. The taxi's the cheapest. It's about, I'd say $35. What tip, roughly, from LaGuardia to Manhattan. And there's an express shuttle bus I've taken. We stayed at a hotel before and took the shuttle to the airport and then catch the main express shuttle bus. It's I think $10, maybe 15 tops. And actually getting to Manhattan very quickly because it's a bus, so it has special bus priority lanes, basically going down into Manhattan over here. So yeah, it was. So that is a good side. That's downside, no train. Now, obviously, when you have to rely on bus in New York City traffic, it may not be the best thing to do. All right, I think it's now time for a pause. All right, so you kind of see here. This is LaGuardia. It's the smallest of the airport. Very similar, just as kind of old, thinking built in the 30s, basically. It is the closest to Manhattan, but there's no space to expand. Now, there is some good news, though. They have finally been doing major renovations at this airport. So I flew here in 2015, and it sucked. It wasn't a fun airport. One, they put the only bar I saw was before security. That was a morning flight, so I'm not drinking that early. But it's the security is on a bridge. So the best way to describe it, kind of you see these kind of gates here. It's like a bridge. They put the security on the bridge. So it's very claustrophobic, very tight, not well thought out. No space to do it, at least at that time. Excuse me, just gonna go to water. So it was painfully slow. It wasn't good. And there was one restaurant. It was an Au Bon Pain, which is another Panera Bread generic rip-off crap, and there was a Hudson News store. There was nothing in there, so it really sucked. Now the good news, they're renovating the whole airport. They just redid terminal. I want to say it's either Terminal 2 would be. It's like the main terminal. It's where Delta's mostly out of, I believe. Like their, so kind of like their main area. So, but like, but anyway, that's done. I think they're redoing the other terminals now, and this doesn't do justice because I was using the older imagery. They're even leaving like this huge parking structure over here. Like these are actually the gates, so it's gonna be somewhere like around here, I believe. It looks massive, and my only guess is, unfortunately, I couldn't find much information on it. I'm sure there's like those very big detailed PDF files, kind of like, they go into a lot of details and everything, and, costs, timelines, and so forth. Kind of like, where they have those details, let's just say. So, but I think that's probably going to move the rental car centers, because the rental car centers are like spread around this area, and there's like these lots, extremely tight. And to be fair, you guys see there's not much space. I mean, it's not like you can just go here and bulldoze this entire neighborhood to put in an airport expansion. That's not going to work. And move the interstate. It's just ridiculous. So, but the good news, it looks like they finally figure out how to use the land they do got and try to maximize that. And especially with the new terminals, I heard it's a lot better, smoother. I've seen pictures inside. I'll try to include some links in the video that just shows how much it's finally coming into the 21st century. Because even I think Joe Biden famously said it's like a third world airport. And he was right when I went there in 2015 before really the renovation project started. And they're moving pretty fast. I give them credit. Like, to redo a whole terminal while keeping it fully operational, that is no easy task. That's a logistical nightmare just thinking about it. But they're doing it, and they're making really good progress. But anyway, before we kind of move on to JFK, this is a Delta. This is actually one of the Delta's hubs. They have two hubs, JFK and here. It's a very unique situation how they got two hubs in the same city. There's no other place I can think of that. But this is mostly a domestic airport. There's a few, obviously, Air Canada, that'd be the international flights. Might have some in the Caribbean or somewhere else. I didn't really see anything when I looked at the list. And obviously, remember, it is the COVID era, so some of these lists have taken flights off. They may re-add them down the road. But it's mostly a domestic airport. Delta's a hub. Southwest, as I mentioned earlier in the video, flies here. And then you have United, too. I don't think American flies here. They may have a few flights from their other hubs. And that's where it gets a little wonky, too, where you may have a hub there, but your airline will fly all three airports, which you may not see in the other city. You don't see that in Chicago as much. United does not do any flights to Midway, or American does do O'Hare, but Delta does flights both to O'Hare and Midway because they don't have a hub in Chicago. But anyway, I digress. But this is primarily domestic. As I said, the pluses are it's very close to Manhattan, the cheapest taxi service, very good, cheap bus system. Downside, no train. If you need to get out of New York City, it's going to take you a while. Now, if you plan to stay in Queens or Brooklyn, definitely would consider this an option. If you don't need to go to New Jersey and so forth, you're in a good spot. Not too far from here is like where the U.S. Open is right now in tennis, or where it's finishing up today, I should say. Citi Field. I stayed out here because we're going to Citi Field and do some baseball, and then going to Bronx for the Yankees, which is up in this area. So yeah, location-wise, it's probably the best one in terms of regards to New York City. Let's say get into Manhattan, stay in New York City area, and so forth. Queens also actually parts of not too far from here. There's actually a rich Asian community that really expanded during the Cold War, from Taiwan, Vietnam, and so forth. A lot of great Asian food throughout the Queens area. Like a very rich Asian district. Even more so than Chinatown today, to believe it or not. It's actually not far there. I just can't remember the exact neighborhood. It's like literally right around this area. I will say this real quick. The Queens is very diverse. Like, even around the airport, I was just there recently, in this area, it's a nice Hispanic area, so you can it's like the whole world's in Queens, it feels like. But yeah, we're going to this is the U.S. Open, site here. Citi Field's right there, so it's really cool. You have the, I think the subway does go there, but I know there's like an MTA, suburban rail network. That's where it starts to become very prominent around here. And as you're going to see just down the path here is JFK. Personally, by the way, this is kind of before it goes, but I really do love the New York City. I've been out there several times over the years. I've always had a good time. In my experience, people are pretty friendly. Now, obviously, it is a big city. You know, if you're gonna slow things down to get delayed, you know, I've been to like restaurants, mom and pop places. You know, they can. I wouldn't say they can't tell you're not a local at first, but you show signs you might be a tourist. Let's say just the way you dress or how you just haven't seen the sights and stuff. And yet they treat, you know, in my experience, they've treated me, you know, my dad and others have been out there, you know, with respect and, you know, not, you know, kind of like friendly, learning where I'm from and so forth. You know, definitely, in my experience, they're definitely more open than I think people would think or realize, especially compared to like maybe like Philadelphia. Philadelphia's kind of rude. That's their attitude. That's what they're known for. Boston's a weird region. I don't know the best way to explain Boston. It's kind of it's very. It's like if you're not from Boston, it's like you're definitely seen as like an outsider. It's kind of hard to get through that bubble. Obviously, at face value, you know, they'll be respectful, not like a jerk or anything, but there's definitely like a unique culture there that really curtails the people that grew up and live in Boston their entire life, more so than, let's say, an outsider trying to visit, you know, trying to fit in or something. You go to New York, you can almost in a way start fitting in a little bit because it's so big, it's so diverse. There's people from around the country, excuse me, and in fact around the world that moved here, resided here, you know, visiting, long-term, short-term, whatever. You know, it's definitely like, you know, it's definitely a world city, one of the few world cities where you think where the world will come together. Probably other ones be like London, Los Angeles, Chicago, pretty up there. I would say Tokyo, even though it's so obviously very predominantly Japanese, but you know, it's so big and there's so much culture and business that you'll see people from all anywhere around the world there. You know, some others, you know, I'd probably put Paris in there, but you know, after that, there's not many after that I can think on top of my head. By the way, I think this is the Belmont racetrack right here. There's also aqueducts somewhere around here, but I believe Belmont's the one that's closest to JFK. And it's the bigger one, so it looks like it's a big one. Alright. Let's go over to JFK here. This is actually, we can actually, let's see if I can get down a little bit. And then we can, this is actually a handcrafted airport in the game, so we should have a little details and stuff. It's so funny I don't hear my plane. Alright. We'll stay above 2,000 feet. Keep that steady. We can pause it right here. We'll just showcase here because this will be a little more interesting. This will be quite a bit said here compared to like. Alright, so this is JFK. So let's see. Right now there's 6 terminals. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so 3, 4, 5, 6. Unless this and that's it here. Actually, yeah, I think this might be terminal 2. I actually don't have the map, but I can tell you a little bit. Anyway, so this is obviously the biggest and busiest airport in the New York City region. One of the busiest in the world. And believe it or not, LaGuardia is also not LaGuardia. LaGuardia, Newark is some of the busiest in the country. But this is obviously the number one that takes the cake. You can just tell from the size and scope, it's a lot bigger. You got multiple runways. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess you got 4 runways, I believe. Yeah, so 1, 2. Yeah. Yeah, see, there's 2 here, here, here. So it looks like 4 runways. But anyway, so by the 50s, it became really expanded as becoming an international powerhouse, let's say. You know, become one of the busiest international airports in the world. I don't know what the busiest one is now. I'm going to guess pre-COVID would have been Heathrow, probably, because, you know, you ever benefit being in Europe, where you're one of the busiest airports in Europe, and it's like so many countries in, you know, one spot, while like here, technically there's only 2 countries kind of near you. I'm being a little disingenuous. You got the Caribbean, obviously, but there's really only one country within like a 2-hour flight near you, or let's say 90-minute flight, where Heathrow, you have multiple countries within 2 hours of each other, so it's a little imbalanced here. But from a long haul perspective, let's think of that. Like think of flights coming from Europe, Asia. All the major airlines go through there, like Korean Air, Japan Airlines, ANA, Emirates, Etihad. They're going to come through here. Actually, Air India was at Newark, and I'm sure they have a flight here as well, just an example. But anyway, so it really started expanding the 50s, and this is kind of beginning the golden jet age. So you think of like, if you ever watched the movie Catch Me If You Can, which is about, the guy that was basically being someone he isn't, just kind of faking it, throughout his life. He faked as a, airline pilot for Pan Am, and then used their logos and stuff to fake write checks. Pan Am's major base was out of JFK, and they were primarily, I would say, international. So that's where they kind of got their start, was international travel. Connecting basically the U.S./New York City to the world. Then TWR Airlines had a big hub there for a long time. So like, and it's actually, can I see it? So actually, this was the TWA term, the original one right there. So, and now this is JetBlue, which I'll go in a minute. But yeah, so yeah, like TWA. So really in the golden age, this was definitely like the beginning of international travel as we know it today. It really started in the 50s, 60s, and JFK was a primary spot. Obviously, I think Heathrow had been a big part of it as well. And some others like Paris, Charles, actually I don't think Charles de Gaulle was built. It was 70s. The golden age is arguably 50s, 60s. I would say even to the 70s, but it's really until the deregulation of the 80s that really kind of changed airlines. More we know today, where I would say it's a bare bones product because you do have premium cabins and services, but it wasn't like the costs were a lot. Actually, the cost of the ticket was a lot more than people realize. People are like, oh, it's only like $300 to travel to Atlanta. Yeah, just inflation, it's like $2,000. But back then, you had like big seats, full first class service and meals, pretty much on the whole plane, and not just like first class. But obviously nowadays it's more about numbers. People need to travel. They're fine. Sitting economy or premium economy with a little more space and not pay a fortune to get there. Back then it was a luxury to travel, especially overseas. Anyway, but kind of moving into, let's say, to today. Well, actually, real quick, last thing, this was also the main airport for the Concorde as well. So Concorde basically connected, British Airways was basically Heathrow, JFK, Air France, Charles de Gaulle, JFK. So basically, this was like one out of 3 airports that saw the Concorde going out of for quite a while, basically for about about 3 decades roughly. Started, I think, in the late 60s, early 70s, and lasted until the early 2000s. Reason that ended, the cost of the Concorde was so expensive. It became basically just a super luxury flight. Everything was first class. There was really no economy whatsoever. No economy in there. And then 9/11 happened, unfortunately, and that killed air traffic for several years. And it's like, you know what? These planes are getting old. They're costly. They don't have the modern computer system by that time. Like, for example, it still had it's still like a 3-person cockpit, when nowadays everything's 2. You needed I think it was a navigator they call it, but they basically needed a third person. You didn't need that with most modern planes by the early 2000s. So basically that was the end of the Concorde. But crazily enough, United is going to actually bring back the Concorde. I'll try to post some link to that. Very fascinating to read. Their goal is to have the Concorde, a new version of the Concorde, up by 2030s, I think. So that'd be very interesting to see that, because if that works, that means like something from from JFK back to London will go from 7-8 hours roughly down to 2 to 3. Think about it's about 14 hours to Japan from here. That may cut it down to like 5 or 6. So there's a lot of endless possibilities there if they can pull it off. But let's move back to today. So this is today. There's 6 terminals. Originally there was 10 actually. They tore several down. Some of it was actually cool. Unfortunately, I say this. We'll talk about the TWA and what JetBlue is doing. But you had this. You had one called the Skyport. It's like a famous kind of like circle. I would say like a big circle. I don't know where it would be on this. Obviously, there's no signs of it left. It was like the famous almost a complete circle. Open. I'd say not open air, but like a glass. I'll post a link there. But it was really cool architecture, especially for its time. That used to be at the Pan Am, I believe, or one of them. It's now gone. But that said, this is this is JetBlue. They actually really just started using the old terminal. So TWA was here until they merged with American around really early 2000s, really around 9/11. They eventually ceased all operations there around then, but then it reopened in the late 2000s with JetBlue kind of kicking off their airline and moving in here. And then with that, they built this current terminal around it. Because this is old. You can see, like, in terms of today's modern air traffic, it can't handle all of this. Like, this is like 3 times the size, I would say. You know, like you can say like 1, 2, 3 roughly. A lot more gates. So, you know, JetBlue. But what they did do, instead of tearing this building down, which I'm really glad they didn't, because I think it's a very cool building, very cool design, and it's part of, I would say, aviation history in the U.S., they actually now convert this into a hotel. A group of people convert this into a TWA-themed hotel. I believe it's still open today. It opened like around a year before COVID, unfortunately. So it's like, yeah, unfortunately, the best way to say that, it's like, that has really screwed everything up. So it's kind of like unfortunate, but it's kind of cool. It's a little expensive, but it's like what they did with the hotel. I just want to explain it real quick. They renovated the main atrium here to kind of look like it did back in the 60s during the heart of the TWA era. And then, like, you know, these areas and other parts became the rooms. And they kind of, you know, they're modernish, but they have like a 60s theme, and they put like TWA logo like on the bags and stuff, like the old TWA 60s logo, which was really cool. So it's like, it's a very, I would like to stay there once or twice just to see it, because like I love TWA. I grew up on that in St. Louis. You know, that's when they used to be headquartered there. So I think it'd be really cool just to kind of see, I wouldn't say aviation, well, partially aviation history, but just kind of like going back in the past a little bit, you know, to the golden age in a way. So I think it'd be really cool, in my opinion, to kind of see that. Shamefully, this is nothing to do with Pan Am. It'd be kind of cool they did something like Pan Am there, because that was like their history as well. But anyway, let's get back to today. 6 terminals. One thing they used to do in the older design, before they kind of started redoing a lot of this in the last 20 years, each terminal used to be more like a specific airline. You mentioned like this, like TWA, you have the Pan Am. You kind of have that today, but it's now more about alliances. I wrote some stuff down. It gets a little confusing, to be honest. So like Terminal 1 is primary Sky Team. So think of like Air France and Alitalia, you know, Japan Airlines. Sky Team, sorry, Air France and Alitalia. That's what Delta. But Delta's not in that terminal. They're somewhere else, apparently. They're in Terminal 4 and 2, which I have a little bit about Terminal 2. So it's like, but then they have Japan Airlines, which is OneWorld, which is the American Airlines, which is their headquarters, or not headquarters, but a major hub here. So it's a little confusing. Like, Heathrow does something similar, but it makes logical sense. They put basically British Airways and OneWorld almost next to each other because they're in the same partnership. So you fly American to London, and then you need to connect to British Airways to get to Nice, France. You're roughly in the same area. If I fly United Star Alliance to, you know, from Newark to London Heathrow, and I need to hop on Lufthansa to get to Berlin, it's in the same terminal. Here, it's like they kind of did that, and then kind of not for some reason. I don't know why. It seems really dumb, but that's what they did. Maybe it's a space issue, which that's the only thing I can think of. Or maybe it's like different times of the day they can get in and out. That's all I can think of. It's really weird, because then Terminal 4 has Delta, and mostly Sky Team is also there. They also use Terminal 2. I'm going to take a wild guess it's this one. So Terminal 2 is like the only terminal that doesn't have international customs. So almost every terminal in JFK has a customs department. So unlike Newark, which only was Terminal 2 had customs, or let's say Chicago here, which only Terminal 5 has customs, here they did every one, because they realized this is all mostly international. This isn't just domestic, it's a little everything. So they want to make sure that every terminal can handle everything, so that way it's not all crowded, let's say here or here. It can handle everything minus this one, I believe, because I believe that's Terminal 2. They're going to actually tear that down soon. They're going to basically tear that down, expand Terminal 4 into that space, and I think they're going to rebuild Terminal 1 as well. But anyway, Terminal 5, which we kind of talked about, this is JetBlue, but then you have Aer Lingus in there. You know, I think they do partners with JetBlue, but they also partners with United and stuff, which is not there. So it's kind of, again, it's kind of like all over the place. And then Terminal 7 is OneWorld and Star Alliance, so that's where you get back to Lufthansa, ANA Airlines. United actually finally got flights back into JFK. The previous CEO sold those routes because they're just an idiot. Let's be honest, if you're selling routes to the biggest airport in the country, then you're just dumb. okay, I'm sorry. If your partners are there and you're just going to leave your partners, then you're just an idiot and he deserved to be fired, which he was. So, but I digress. They have a couple of routes, mostly San Francisco, Los Angeles, because the cross-country flights between New York and LA and San Francisco are some of the busiest domestic routes in the country, along with Chicago. So they're back there, at least a couple of them. So let's say you fly NA to, I don't know why you would, maybe Lufthansa. All right, let's do Lufthansa, sorry. Let's say you fly Lufthansa JFK, then you need to connect to San Francisco, and you can connect that way. Now, they do have direct routes, usually from Frankfurt to Los Angeles, I believe, but sometimes you may save quite a bit of money that way, and maybe you want to split the trip up, because you're going to be on a plane a long time, so at least you can go through here and connect, and at least they got a lot of them together. And then Terminal 8, again, is mostly One World, but American Airlines as well. American Airlines, as I mentioned, actually there's 3 hubs here. I mentioned Delta earlier. American Airlines is the primary hub here, and then JetBlue. Now, one thing I will say, when you look at these routes, be mindful that they have domestic flights out of JFK, like American and Delta. Not as many, though. And I have a couple examples I can show you that. So, like, you look at the American, a lot of it's more for international. So you either get them to Europe, the Caribbean, maybe parts of South America. It's about primarily international flights, mostly. They do got, their own domestic routes, but let's say to smaller regional cities, not as much, because one, American, when they merged with US Airways, got a big hub in Philadelphia. So at worst, they can just throw you down to Philadelphia on a little puddle jumper, and then you connect domestically from there, which would be a pain. But mind you, there's only so many gates they have, so that's kind of what happens. And then same with Delta. Delta's got LaGuardia. LaGuardia is primarily a domestic airport. It's just right over there. It's that far. It's only a few miles. So in their view, it's like, okay, if you need to go domestically, I mean, first of all, you're going to go through customs and there's going to be extra security anyway, for the most part. Just the way that's so kind of like. I was trying to say. So basically, it's like, you know what? You're already going to leave the airport. Most just send you over to the other one. And it kind of sucks. Remember, this is a big airport. You basically got 3 hubs. Now, JetBlue would say be mostly internal because they're mostly domestic, minus the Caribbean. And now they were doing like a London route, which I don't know how it's doing, but there's a London route. So primarily, you're just going to go through, that would be more together. But anyway. So it kind of sucks, but it kind of makes sense. There's only so much space there. But yeah. So I got a couple last notes before I kind of land this plane. But the good news, they're going to start doing some major renovations here, expand the terminals and so forth. And now, granted, it's kind of like I talked about earlier with, kind of like with Newark and that. It's like, well, when will all this traffic recover? I'm sure it will eventually recover, but, there's going to be some good debate, especially in regards to how we approach business travel and so forth. I don't know. And I think a lot of companies are at a crossroads. Should we go back in the office? Should we not go back in the office? Should we do a hybrid? Blah, 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 blah. We have all this video teleconference technology now. So, but yeah, it's sticking a little quick here. But yeah, anyway, I hope you guys did find this informative. Oh yeah, the last thing about transportation to and from the airport. We can get back to the plane. The good news, this is connected by the subway. Obviously, it would not be a quick subway ride, but you do have the subway nonetheless to get in and out of this airport. And also a taxi ride. It's about I'd say it's in the middle. It's like $55 to $60, I believe, when I looked it up. I took a taxi to Manhattan. So, but anyway, I kind of hope, as I say, I hope this is pretty informative. Oh yeah, kind of like the highway. The good news, you do have this highway here. Now, I'm not personally experienced, but again, it's like you got to go out west or up north. You're going to go through a lot of traffic and stuff. But if you're staying on Long Island and so forth, and this is perfect. You're right there, and traffic eases up and continue to go east, obviously. So, but yeah, it's kind of as we wrap this up and I land the plane here in a few minutes. Kind of go over some stuff, but yeah. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've only been to 2 of the 3. The good news, LaGuardia's been a lot of renovations, should be a lot better now. But the way I look at it, if you're going to go domestically, chances are you're unless it's maybe American, which will do like flights like Miami or some of the cross-country stuff, longer ones, you're probably going to go through LaGuardia or Newark. And if this is your final destination, you have no problem. You know, just be mindful. It's like, okay, what am I planning to do? You know, good news, both are easy to Manhattan. LaGuardia is cheaper, but you know, if you're carrying luggage, do you really want to carry that on a bus? I would say no. At least New Jersey Transit, it's actually pretty spacious. They even got stuff for luggage, so that's probably a lot more easier to handle if your luggage compared to like LaGuardia, you know, on like a city bus basically. Excuse me. So I would keep that in mind. Obviously, you're gonna get a rental car, better setup, much better setup at Newark right now. That said, I think there is potential that it will get better soon at LaGuardia soon compared to like, you know, so it's more modern kind of part we see at Newark and other airports. But anyway, and then obviously international, then very likely would be JFK. Obviously, there is quite a bit at Newark for that, but it is going to be primarily United and a few other partners. And just be mindful. You know, if you're going to connect, you know, be mindful what airline you need. If you're going to take United and connect to basically ANA, you don't. Then you're screwed. Then you're going to be stuck at Newark trying to get over here, and there's just no good way to do it. So, I'm coming in too high. We'll see how this goes. Last time I did this, it did not land well. Well, it was on the field, so to be fair. Yeah, I'm just keeping an eye on my speed. The good news is a very small plane. I don't need much runway to land this thing. But it should be a lot lower than I am. Oh boy, this is going to get interesting. Anyway, so yeah, as I say, you know, a lot of it really comes down what your final destination is, what's your goals, where you're connecting. But you know, I hope I hope you guys find it informative and interesting, kind of explaining all the differences between each airport, and you know, especially trying to really understand, you know, kind of like the pluses and minuses, the airlines and so forth, because it's a lot of information. Ooh, that went a lot better than I thought. Man, that plane is from DFW. Look at that. See, as I said, American Airlines to Miami. MIA, AAL. So that's what that stands for. Yeah, we can see there's a lot of airlines here. A lot of JetBlue. See a Delta. Ooh, BA Delta. That might be British Airways. Yep, that's Gatwick. I'm pretty sure that's the Gatwick Airport sign. I don't know what CAP is. Oh, is that Korean Airlines? That might be Korean Airlines. I'd say it's just fascinating. So. Yeah, I have a bug right now. These libraries I put in, it's like not properly displaying on some of these planes. Oh, here it goes. I guess it's a bunch of loading textures. Now the downside, the planes they populate don't make sense. This plane would never be here. EasyJet does not fly to the U.S. It's a European low-cost carrier. Anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed this flight as we kind of pull in here at JFK. I think my plane's good enough for one of these gates. We'll park it right here. Who cares? I'm taking up someone's gate. Almost there. And there we go. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and hope have a good time and take care.